Hello, Geo here with video number 3 for my YouTube channel. And today I'm going to change it up a little bit. My first two videos, or my last two videos, were about the theory of relativity. And I intend to do more videos on the theory of relativity, but only when I actually have something to say, something I guess maybe meaningful to say. And so I'm currently watching other videos trying to learn more about the theory of relativity so I can hopefully have more intelligent things to say about it. So that's on the back burner as far as new videos go. Today is just a one-off, and so one of the things, there's a couple of things that I really like, and so I'm just going to share an example of that with you today. So I really love to read, and I really love to read good books, well-written books about history. And you know, I'm a real history buff, very interested in history, which is interesting because as a kid, when I went to school, I probably, like a lot of kids, I was taught history. It was as flat could be. You know, typically we would learn dates and events, you know, when things happened, but typically when it was taught to me anyway, history was very, it was lifeless. It really didn't resonate when it was taught to me. And so my interest in history has arisen over time as I've read books, mainly read books, but also now watched YouTube videos, documentaries, and so on, that really breathe life into what was actually going on at the times when these historical events occurred. So anyway, today I'm going to give you a little book report about a book that I recently read, a very well written book about the Norman Conquest, and the book is called The Norman Conquest by a fellow named Marc Morris. And just a little background for you, a little history of how I got this book. So a few years ago I went to England for a little vacation, and just so happened that we toured around. We chose different places to go to, and one of the places we went to, which I'd never been to, was the city of York in the north part of England. And what an amazing city York is. There's so much history there. It's incredible. We saw, for example, a little piece of a Roman wall that had been built about 2,000 years ago. And then we saw structures that had been built over time from that point forward. So the oldest thing we saw was about 2,000 years old. And then you move forward, we saw the great big monastery that had been, I guess, generally over time going to ruin ever since Henry VIII took all of the Catholic Church's property. That is also there. There's old churches, varying ages of churches, you know, from the 1200s, 1300s. I think there might have been even some that went back to the Norman Conquest times. The city wall, I think about 70% of the original city wall for the city of York is still in existence, and you can actually take a walk right around the top of the wall. We actually stayed within the old city walls. Just by the wall, we could look out our window. We could see the wall was just like 100 feet away or something. Fascinating place. Went to the City of London, went to the British National Museum, and I was just browsing through the bookstore in the British National Museum. I came upon this book, and I flipped through it, and I thought, well, that looks like it might be well written, because you know, some history books are better than others. This one is extremely well written. It really breathes life into the Norman Conquest, and just by way of history of the Norman Conquest. So in 1066, the year 1066, William the Conqueror, who was the Duke of Normandy, which of course is just across the Channel from the English Channel from England. He had 700 ships full of soldiers. He went across the Channel to southern England to a place called Hastings, and ultimately battled this king. What was his name? there was a fellow who had basically taken over as king after the death of a fellow named Edward the Confessor. What was this guy's name? Holy smokes. Whatever his name was. Anyway, he'd taken over. Oh, King Harold. That's right. So he was one of the leading nobles. King Edward the Confessor had actually had ties to Normandy already, and had William claimed had basically named William as his heir. But this King Harold had just he had a lot of power in England. So as soon as Edward died, and late in I think it was 1065, whatever, late in the year, right around Christmas time, 1065, Harold just stepped in, had a coronation ceremony right away. Hi, I'm king. And then William spent the next year, I guess, putting together an army and ultimately going over and defeating Harold, and Harold was killed in that battle. So just a lot of very interesting history. It's amazing to me just how much documentation has survived from that period or near that period. So there were probably mainly monks, Catholic monks, who would write these chronologies. There's the Bayeux Tapestry, which is a big, long, I guess it's not really a tapestry, it's actually what's the word when you sew pictures into cloth? Embroidery. It's an embroidery. But they call it the Bayeux Tapestry, and it tells the story of William the Conqueror and so on. But there's other sources that this Marc Morris draws on. There's a couple of other great things about this book, or three other great things. And this is what I really like about books like this. Here, right at the beginning of the book, there's a map of England and there's a map of Normandy at the time from that period, with all the different places that are noteworthy. When I read this book, I was forever flipping back to these maps just to get context of where these different places were. And that, to me, having a resource like that right in the book is hugely valuable. Another resource, there is genealogical charts, both for the King of England and for the Duke of Normandy. And again, this is really quite the soap opera of all the different individuals and their claims to the crown and their roles they played and everything. And so this is hugely useful, having this genealogical charts. And then the other thing is there are a few pictures. For example, this is called Battle Abbey. That's where the Battle of Hastings occurred, and William the Conqueror built an abbey, I guess, there called Battle Abbey. William the Conqueror seems like he had a lot of issues with guilt over all the people he was killing, and so he would build these churches and monasteries all over the place to atone for his sins, I guess. Anyway, there's pictures from the Bayeux Tapestry there as well, and so on. So this is a really well written book. Quite long. It's 400 pages long almost of text. Actually, 350 pages. So it's not super long, but it flows quite well. Maybe a little bit more detailed than a lot of people would like about William the Conqueror. Not me. I thought it was just the proper amount of detail to really delve into who these people were as much as possible, how they all fit together, the political motivations and so on behind the actions that the various people took, and then just a discussion about really what was a very seminal period of time in British history, English history. So William the Conqueror, he conquered in 1066. He died, I believe, 1086. About 20 years later, he died. He was in his late 50s when he died, which I guess was old. That was quite an advanced age at that time. He created the Domesday Book, they called it. So just before he died, he had these he organized this big inquiry into all of the property in England, who owned it, um, and the book goes into why this Domesday book is incredibly interesting. Like, I mean, it's a huge uh, inventory of all the property in England at the time, who owned it. So it really gives a really good picture of a lot of things, the state of England at the time. He so and for me, what it did was it kind of brings to light, even though this was 1,000 years ago, these folks were organized. I mean, they were brutal. William killed hundreds of thousands of people. Like he was responsible for a lot of death and a lot of carnage, which was there's a passage in the book here, a quote from him, ostensibly, where he says, "Well, I didn't have a choice. This is the world I live in. I had to fight. I was born fighting." And so it was a brutal time, more brutal than now. Now is a fairly brutal time too, but I think that at that time, conquests and wars, and these guys are always fighting each other, and they often had very poor reasons. I think, they're just, I want to be the king. Okay, well, I'm going to get an army and I'm going to go fight with you guys, and a whole bunch of people are going to get killed just so I can be king. So anyway, William the Conqueror definitely had a large number of deaths on his conscience, but he was organized, and they were organized, and I spent a lot of time working in the corporate world, and when I see the way these kings and nobility and so dukes and so on would fight with each other and compete, I can draw a lot of analogies with the corporate world today. There's competition, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on that really isn't so different. Hopefully, we humans in 1,000 years have become perhaps somewhat more enlightened. Maybe, maybe not, or maybe there's just going to be a nuclear bomb tomorrow and it's going to kill us all because some guy wants to be king. Who knows? So I guess one of the things I learned from this book is just, humans are humans. They have their foibles. And William the Conqueror and the people in his time were not really that different from us now. But they were more violent, believe it or not. I think that was a much more violent time than we're living in now. So again, I guess I'm an infernal optimist, and it looks to me like we humans are actually improving, becoming more enlightened, albeit very slowly. So anyway, Norman Conquest by Marc Morris. Great book, well written, really breathes life into the Norman Conquest. Really gives you a good sense of what happened at the time, the historical context, the way the people lived, the way the people dealt with each other. Just a great book, really well written. Highly recommended. Geo out.